Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and of course I'm here to break down everything that went down today in that Commanders versus Dolphins joint practice that went down in Miami. It got so hot to the point that they had to go inside to end practice. But either way, Mike Sainristil and Jayden Daniels look like they're going to win their respective Rookie of the Year awards. We're going to dive into why I say that. Of course, we're going to get into every single position group for the team as well, but it looks like the Washington Commanders corners have improved and looked pretty good against the Dolphins receivers, like even Tyreek Hill. Brandon Coleman was back in pads, even though he didn't practice, but that's progress. The Commanders are looking for a wide receiver too. Jahan Dotson is apparently not living up to the hype. We're going to dive into that shortly because I just already did a whole 40-minute video breaking all of that down, but we're going to still talk about it a little bit in this video. Also, Kendall Fuller got some revenge on us in the practice, and have the Commanders finally found their franchise kicker? And then lastly, the Dolphins reporters and national media absolutely love Jayden Daniels. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Again, I have y'all updated on every little thing going on with the Commanders, your one-stop shop for any updates, any signings, anybody getting cut, any speculation, rumors, facts, any reports. And I will be live streaming that upcoming preseason game against the Dolphins, of course, all 4 quarters and everything, analysis afterwards, all of that type of stuff. So stay tuned for everything. Make sure you pull up to that live stream on Saturday. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this video. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so before practice started, y'all already know we got a few things to go over with. Like, first of all, the scene, the setting, what's going on. Then, of course, we have a big-time injury update, a few injuries to update y'all on, even on the Dolphins side. One injury in particular. Also, Dan Quinn spoke to the media before practice, and that's where we're going to go ahead and talk about the whole Jahan Dotson situation. And then we'll get to every position group on the team, starting with the quarterbacks, then we go running back, then wide receiver, then tight end, offensive line, all the way through the defense. And you definitely want to stick around for some big special teams updates, man. Big time. And then, of course, we end the video with a bunch of random stuff. But Mitch Tisler said that it seemed very soupy outside, but it was still beautiful. And then you had Sam Fortier that said it's definitely different than the rainy New York that they had to deal with last week, where it was all gloomy and a little chilly. Now you're in Miami, fully sunny, a little bit of clouds, and it's just extremely hot. Again, to the point that they had to go inside to end practice for like the end of practice. And then shouts out to Mitch Tisler for pointing this out. Kendall Fuller was in an orange jersey. That indicates that that's the player that gets to pick the music playlist for that day in practice. I would love for the Commanders to do something like that, but it was Kendall Fuller's day. I'm pretty sure the Dolphins allowed him to get this day because he was going against a lot of his former teammates, his former team and everything. So that's really cool. Of course, the orange jersey rotates every practice, and so this was Kendall Fuller's day, and I absolutely love that. And apparently he was picking some bangers because we're going to look at it later, but Jayden Daniels was definitely vibing out to some of the music there. I'm going to show y'all that a little bit later. But now moving on to injuries. First of all, Dan Quinn said that Marcus Mariota is dealing with a groin injury and Sam Hartman dealing with a shoulder injury, or we already know they're out for the preseason game against Miami. He said it days ago that if you can't practice, you're not going to play in the preseason game, and that definitely goes for Marcus Mariota and Sam Hartman, who do not practice today. Nikki Javala also pointed out the fact that hence the decision to bring in Trace McSorley, who flew in last night, got his physical this morning before their joint practice, and will play Saturday. He's so new that Dan Quinn just met him for the first time this morning at the joint practice. It's crazy. But shouts out to Chick Hernandez for pointing this out. The Commanders make it official, announcing the signing of quarterback Trace McSorley. He will serve as the #3 quarterback for the preseason game #2 versus Miami. So he'll be third on the depth chart. You have Jayden Daniels, Jeff Driscoll, and Trace McSorley, who we just signed yesterday. Sam Hartman missed practice this week with a shoulder injury, so there he goes. And of course, Marcus Mariota is again dealing with a minor groin injury. They're saying that it may not necessarily be that bad for him. Sam Hartman's injury is a little bit more concerning, but still, since Marcus Mariota was not able to practice today, he's not playing in the preseason game either. Also, shouts out to Trace McSorley because he will wear number 3. which is basically an indication of where he is in the quarterback depth chart. I'm pretty sure that wasn't by design, but I just thought that was an interesting parallel there. Also, again, Dan Quinn's first time meeting Trace McSorley was this morning in practice. Here's the clip right here of him talking to him. And he's literally here just because they need a third quarterback to get through the joint practice today and to get through the preseason game on Saturday. This is not like we're hoping we found a gem in a quarterback that may be able to be a solid backup for us or anything like that. I know he has experience in Cliff Kingsbury's offense, but if anything, that just goes to show even more that they just wanted to bring in a guy that could come in and run the offense effectively enough with the backups to where we get to evaluate those guys. Because we brought in a quarterback that had no experience with Cliff Kingsbury's offense at all. You know, that will reflect poorly on the wide receivers that are trying to make a name for themselves. We only have 2 more preseason games to go for guys fighting for their roster spots, fighting for their lives right now. So you would hope that even though Trace McSorley was not good for the Arizona Cardinals at all while Cliff Kingsbury was the head coach there, at least he's up to speed with the offense to a certain extent. There's like a minimum amount of offense that he at least understands, to the point that the receivers should be able to show what they can do. The offensive line, everything can get moving. Maybe we can convert some first downs and keep the offense on the field long enough to where we can evaluate everybody and give everybody on the offense around the quarterback an honest chance to show what they can do again before we get to these final 53-man roster cuts. Also, shouts out to Nikki Javala because she pointed out the fact that Trace McSorley was getting in extra work after practice with David Blau and Martavis Bryant. So David Blau is your assistant quarterbacks coach, and then you have Martavis Bryant as a receiver we just recently signed a couple of days ago. Trace McSorley, the quarterback that you just signed yesterday. So now they're just trying to put in extra time to try to catch up and see if they have a chance to potentially make this roster. More so in the Martavis Bryant case at receiver than Trace McSorley, but you never know. And then also an update, Zach Ertz was not at practice today, and he will also not play in the game, but it's non-injury related. So calm down, non-injury related. And Dan Quinn said, quote, "it's for an excellent reason," unquote. And I love the fact that Dan Quinn is like just that cool of a head coach to even word it like that, because apparently Zach Ertz is about to have a baby soon. And the fact that Dan Quinn is even allowing him to miss practice and the preseason game for that is already cool. But even the way that he announced it, like he's missing practice, he's missing the game, but it's for an excellent reason. Didn't even say exactly what it was, but you can guess. And also really want to emphasize the fact that, like, we're going to talk about Jayden Daniels at some point in this video and how fantastic he was today. I feel like since we're already talking about the fact that Zach Ertz was not at the joint practice today and he will not be there for the preseason game as well, I really want to emphasize the fact that Jayden Daniels had an amazing day today without his favorite target in Zach Ertz, his definitive favorite target. Terry McLaurin, he likes throwing the ball to him as well, and some of the other targets out there, but Zach Ertz is the clear-cut #1 target for Jayden Daniels, as we've discussed in several training camp breakdowns. Even the joint practice against the Jets, you saw clear as day that Zach Ertz is the go-to guy for Jayden Daniels. And so it's very encouraging that Jayden Daniels can still ball out without basically what I would assume kind of was like maybe his crutch in Zach Ertz. Like, you know, I know Jayden Daniels is a rookie and he's been passing every test that we've given him. He's exceeded expectations, but there are still some things like, what is he going to do when in a regular season in certain scenarios? What happens if Zach Ertz, the guy that you've been throwing the ball towards the most so far in training camp, is not available? He's hurt or whatever. He's off the field just to catch a rest. Can you produce? He showed today that he can do that, and I absolutely love that. So again, we're going to talk about Jayden Daniels after we get to the position group by position group breakdown of everything. We're going to start with the quarterbacks, but I did want to make sure that y'all had that in the back of your minds, that when we're talking about Jayden Daniels, remember his go-to target in Zach Ertz wasn't there, and that's very encouraging because that shows that Zach Ertz is not a crutch. That just shows that Zach Ertz just happens to be his favorite target, but it's not somebody that Jayden Daniels depends on and needs in order to go out there and be efficient at the quarterback position. Also, Commanders rookies Jordan McGee and Johnny Newton are still both dealing with injuries and did not even go to Miami, so you know they're not playing in the preseason game. Still don't have an update on Jordan McGee and the severity of his injury, and we're still kind of in the dark a little bit about Johnny Newton's situation because he started practicing, he started doing team drills, suddenly is not again. I hope they're both okay, but I prefer to err on the side of caution. Let them rest as long as they need to in order to be 100% when they come back. We don't necessarily need them, but we would love to have them. Also, Brandon Coleman, our projected starter left tackle, was finally out there in pads for the first time in a while, like probably over a week, but he worked on the side when people got into individuals and teams, so he's still not necessarily practicing. I'm not expecting him to play in that preseason game against the Dolphins, but this was the first time he's been in pads in a while, so at least that's an encouraging step. But again, he still didn't do anything, so you know, how encouraging can it actually even be? Also, JP Finley pointed out the fact that Jalen Ramsey did not participate in practice today. No pads, nothing, just long pants on, chilling. And then at a certain point in the middle of practice, the cart came out for linebacker Bo Bauer. Shouts out to Ben Standig for pointing out the fact that he was down for a minute with what looked like a leg injury, but he was able to get up and gingerly walk over to the cart himself, kind of like Alex Akambulu. But at the same time, you see that we placed him on IR and they ended up reaching an injury settlement with him yesterday. So, you know, I'm hoping for the best for Bo Bauer, but just because you walk to the cart does not necessarily mean that you will not end up on IR. And then shouts out to Nicky Javala for pointing out the fact that teammates even came over and patted Bo Bauer on the helmet. I love the camaraderie there. I love the support. Seems to be a right leg situation. He was visibly frustrated. I would be too. He slammed his hand on the cart after getting on. I fully understand, man. You don't get so many chances to make it in the NFL. And, you know, hopefully we bring him back next year because it seems like the injury is pretty bad. So hopefully next offseason he gets another chance, but you just never know. So I fully understand why he's more upset than sad. I would be very angry as well. Now let's get to what the coaches had to say. More so Dan Quinn more than anybody else, but also a quote from Mike McDaniels as well. First of all, Dan Quinn opened up the practice by praising Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel. He said that the two work together with the Atlanta Falcons, like a lot of us know, and have a lot of love and respect shared between the two. And I mean, I know Mike McDaniels definitely loves Dan Quinn, because I don't know if y'all know, but there was a story about Mike McDaniels struggling with sobriety, and Dan Quinn played a huge role in getting him back on track. And now you see him as the head coach of a very successful Miami Dolphins team, a playoff contender, and considered one of the better coaches in the NFL. And so even in his press conference before practice, Mike McDaniels said, quote, "It could have looked a lot of different ways if you didn't have the support going through your journey of becoming sober." And basically he was talking about his time with Dan Quinn and the impact that Dan Quinn had on him when they were back in Atlanta together. And Dan Quinn had a good quote. He said, "All of us need teammates, and Mike did the work." So he made sure to give him his credit as well. So those are just two head coaches that happen to have joint practices together, and they have a lot of respect and love between each other. So that's great. That's probably why you didn't see any major fights today. Now, there were a couple of scuffles. We're going to break that down, especially when we get to the defensive side of this video. But that's probably a reason why we made sure that, like, things didn't get too out of hand. We have respect for each other, like the players versus the players and things like that. We didn't want anybody to get hurt. I don't know what happened with the Bo Bauer situation, but it sounds like that was the only injury that happened during the practice. Dan Quinn also spoke very highly of the value of joint practices just in general. He mentioned the amount of different looks and competition that players will see and what it means for players who don't get much time in practice to get those snaps and in preseason games. It's a chance to show skill sets for 31 other teams as well. That's a solid point. So if you're a guy that is not necessarily destined to make the Commanders' final 53-man roster, when you're in these joint practices, when you're in these preseason games, you're getting further exposure to other teams, and maybe you're auditioning for those guys as well. Shouts out to Dan Quinn for even being aware of something like that. Like, as a head coach, that doesn't even necessarily have to concern you. I got my 53 guys. I got my practice squad. I think it's like 15 or something like that. We're good to go. But the fact that he cares about all of the other guys that will end up getting cut so much that he's even talking about it in a press conference, like the fact that it's just that forefront in his mind, is big time. Just another reason why the Dan Quinn hire was excellent. You see the relationship he has with Mike McDaniels, players and coaches and front office people all around the league, and then just how aware he is, how self-aware he is with a lot of different things. He understands the situation that a lot of these guys are going through. It's amazing. Dan Quinn also said that they are in the middle of a search for wide receiver 2. Now, talking about awareness, this started a bunch of stuff on the internet. Now, of course, again, I did a full 40 40-minute video breaking down every angle I can think of and every opinion, fact on the whole Jahan Dotson situation. B. Mitch potentially, it seems like, calling him out. Dan Quinn basically calling out Jahan and saying like, hey man, we don't have a wide receiver 2 right now. And I even talked about, we even broke down like Ron Rivera's draft classes and who we could have gotten instead of the guys that we did get, all kinds of stuff. Should we trade Jahan for Brandon Ayuk, because that's offer still even on the table? Talked about all of that in a 40-minute video breakdown that came out earlier. So we're not going to get into a lot of that today, but I still feel like it's important context to bring up in this training camp breakdown. So of course, a lot of players in the mix, but Dan Quinn specifically mentioned Olamide Zaccheaus for having a good camp, man. At this point, I'm on point with the Olamide, man. It's second nature now. But George Carmi also brings up a good point. A few people on Twitter that I follow bring up great points, so I'm gonna definitely give you those to y'all right now. Again, I already laid out all of my opinions and feelings and thoughts on this situation again in that 40-minute video, but then I saw some additional tweets after I put out that 40-minute video that I feel like is worth bringing up in this training camp video, starting with my boy George Carmi at GCarmi21. Make sure you follow him on Twitter and the YouTube. He has a YouTube channel with Big Doug, does things with Mark Bullock. I mean, excellent analyst over there. He said somewhat of an indictment on Dotson. Maybe his skill set doesn't fit with the team's new scheme. I'm still optimistic on the Dotson front. He's an undersized but skilled route runner who is best suited in the slot. However, he's absolutely a good piece to have. I completely agree. He may not necessarily be Cliff Kingsbury's cup of tea or the Commanders in general's cup of tea, but there's ways you can utilize him, man. It's not like he's just completely useless. Now, we could debate about whether he was worth a first-round pick or not, whether he's a wide receiver 2 or not. That time will tell for that, but it's not like people are acting like we should just discard the guy, like he's just completely useless. And then shouts out to Sam 48. Make sure you follow him as well at Sam4TR. He said, reading between the lines, while I don't think Jahan is in danger of being like wide receiver 5, not that far down the chart, but this is a case of preaching competition, and it seems more earnest than others, such as quarterback. And that's a great point. I completely agree there, that it seems like we actually have real position group competitions this time around. With the previous regime, we would act like it, but in actual theory and actual practicality, we did not have real actual position group battles, like authentic ones. Like Jahan Dotson, just because he was a first-round pick, was already anointed wide receiver 2 off rip with Ron Rivera and those guys. But with this regime under Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, Jahan Dotson has to go out there and earn it. Again, I said this weeks ago, Dan Quinn and Joey Jr. made it very clear that we're starting from ground zero for everybody. Even guys like Terry McLaurin and Jonathan Allen have to earn their reps and their starting spots. Apparently, Jahan Dotson started from that same zero like everybody else and just didn't get up to wide receiver 2 like a lot of people, including me, assumed that he probably would. Sam 48 finished by saying, some intrigue for the last couple of weeks for camp. This is going to be one of the major talking points and things that we focus on to finish the offseason before we get to the regular season. Where is Jahan Dotson in this wide receiver battle? Again, he's not in danger of not making the roster or anything like that, but is he wide receiver 2? Is he wide receiver 3? Or is it what it looks like right now, potentially wide receiver 4 beyond Diami and Olamide? Now, shouts out to Jeff Mueller. He does I believe fantasy football stuff, and he said a good follow for Washington Camp Insight and Fantasy Impact is bleeding burgundy and gold, so shouts out to burgundy and gold as well. He said, notes, Jahan Dotson has struggled mightily. Luke McCaffrey has not stood out, could be wide receiver 5/6 entering week 1. And again, these are like fantasy football points. These are from the point of view of a guy that does fantasy drafts, just to give you a heads up, but this is still fairly insightful for the Washington Commanders overall. Olamide Zaccheaus is right now the favorite to be wide receiver 2 over Dotson, and then Diami Brown is making a push. But the biggest detail, Jahan Dotson is being overdrafted in fantasy leagues. I wonder if Washington goes more 12 personnel to get both Zach Ertz and Ben Sinnott on the field with the wide receiver struggling. All excellent points, all thinking points that keep in the back of your mind as we're going through the rest of this offseason and the rest of the training camp in these last 2 preseason games. And then shouts out to Craig Hoffman because he brings up a great point as well. Situational work has seemingly been the truest indicator of the depth chart. And Olamide Zaccheaus was wide receiver 2 and some of it earlier this week, so that tells you everything you need to know about where the depth chart is. Terry McLaurin's obviously a wide receiver 1, and right now it seems like the competition is between Olamide Zaccheaus and Diami Brown for wide receiver 2 and 3, and then it just seems like Jahan Dotson is kind of just wide receiver 4 right now. I don't think he can fall below that, but I don't know, man. It's looking a little weird. I mean, even John Com himself, and again, John Com, I want to emphasize this every time I bring up a John Com tweet, report, opinion, or anything like this. he's one of those reporters that he prefers to be right than to be first. He's only going to say it if he truly means it, if he truly has enough information to back up what he's saying. He said Dotson has not emerged and Zaccheaus has been very consistent all summer. This is a guy that's been at every practice. And yes, I just went forward in time. This is like 4 hours later than just a couple of seconds ago. But either way, my point is, I do like Olamide Zaccheaus. I do, but if he's your second best receiver, we do have a problem on our hands. I'm not gonna lie, that's not an ideal situation. I mean, I'm not to say that he's a guy that's just been bouncing around the league, but he's been on several teams, and we kind of picked him up late in free agency, and he's a pretty decent player. He's a good player, and maybe he's having the best training camp of his career, but still, if Olamide Zaccheaus is your second best receiver, then the Commanders probably do not like their receiver room, like Dan Quinn is basically saying. Shouts out to George Carmi, because he also brings up a great point. And this is an excellent point. This is probably my favorite point out of everything. He brought up the fact that Jayden Reed thrived in Green Bay as a versatile tool in offense. One of many good young wide receivers in Green Bay. I don't see why Dotson can't be used in the same way out of the slot and deployed all over the field. And he even provided like stats, like they have very similar 40 times, very similar athletic profiles, like same height, a 10-pound difference in weight, but Jahan Dotson is slightly faster, Jayden Reed is slightly bigger and things like that. Same exact arm length, same age by like only a month or two. Like, it's really crazy. I mean, both coming from the Big Ten, the parallels are insane. And his point is, if the Packers can utilize him in so many ways, why can't we do that with Jahan Dotson? At the very least, even if he doesn't live up to be our wide receiver too. Like the right-hand man to Terry McLaurin, the Robin to Terry McLaurin's Batman. At the very least, you can deploy him how the Packers did Jayden Reed. He also continues with another tweet right under it. The Packers use Jayden Reed as a punt returner, as a slot wide receiver, and a playmaker out of the backfield in the running game. I don't see why the Commanders can't do the same. You can easily manufacture touches for Dotson via the screen game as well. And those are all fantastic points, because the punt returning thing is interesting, because I've been saying since at least over a year ago that Jahan Dotson could be really like one of the best punt returners on the team, arguably the best, like just with his skill set, his agility and things like that. The only reason I didn't want him doing punt returns is because I felt like he was too valuable as a receiver. But if we're getting to the point that people are surpassing him on the depth chart and as far as like being a starter and getting most of the snaps and targets, it's like, why not go ahead and use him as a returner? That's where you can get elite value from a Jahan Dotson, because I think he has the like just the natural, because Terry McLaurin is really fast. He runs a 4.3 something, but he's straight line speed. He's not extremely agile, quick, change of direction and things like that. Jahan is. That's why Jahan could ultimately be, if we're talking about ceiling, I believe Jahan Dotson and Mike Sainristil are probably made to be the best returners on this team, especially punt return wise. And then again, you can give him the ball out of the backfield and let him basically do what he does in punt returns, and that's make people miss. So I'm right with George Carmi there, man. That's an excellent point that I did not bring up in my video breakdown earlier today. And then also, Scott Abraham brought up the point that when the dust settles, I still think Jahan Dotson will still make an impact for the Commanders this season. I think Dan Quinn is basically just trying to light a fire under him right now and basically just don't give up on Jahan Dotson. I agree. I think that, yes, some people may be overreacting a little bit with the Jahan Dotson situation, Dan Quinn calling him out. I believe that was Brian Mitchell. I believe it was Jahan Dotson that Brian Mitchell was calling out. But I do feel like people may be overreacting a little bit, because I think at the end of the day, maybe Dan Quinn is just literally doing this to call out Jahan Dotson and let him know, hey man, we need you to be better. Maybe he is still wide receiver too, but Dan Quinn doesn't want to paint that narrative so that Jahan Dotson has a goal to reach, has something to work towards. That could be a possibility. That may not be what's going on, but it also could be. And then Dan Quinn also said that Jayden Daniels and certain vets like Jonathan Allen and Bobby Wagner will get more work in joint practice today like they did than in the actual preseason game. So don't expect to see Jayden Daniels a lot. This regime, at the very least, Dan Quinn and these guys do not want their starters playing too much at all. And I guess they've already seen enough from Jayden Daniels to be confident with him going into week 1 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay, to where he played 1 drive in the first preseason game, may only play like 2 this next one, and then may not even play at all in the third. I mean, if anything, that shows that they have a lot of confidence in Jayden Daniels, and that's a good sign. If he's sitting when Bobby Wagner's sitting, That tells you everything you need to know. These are the guys that they're confident that they don't need any more reps. They're ready to go. And the only thing that we could do by putting them out there in those preseason games too long is to risk injury. But there's not much more development to be done there. Huge compliments to Jayden Daniels. Dan Quinn also said that they were going to put the DBs in much harder situations in the joint practice today and the preseason versus the Dolphins. And they want to make sure that it's like real game scenarios. They're not going to try to help them out with certain coverages or certain blitz packages. They want those DBs basically on the island to see who can really cut it. When worst case scenario, who are the guys that stand outside position? When I like that. He also said that he wanted to push guys and see how they respond. A bunch of one-on-one coverages, single high with the safety. So corners one-on-one, safeties out there on the island on the back end as well. They're doing everything that they can to stress the DBs and see what they can get out of them, because if you can prosper in that environment, imagine when Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. put you in situations to win. Right now, they're trying to put you in situations not to win, to see who still comes out of the ash as basically like a golden gem. But just imagine if you're that golden gem out of the ash, what they do when they put the right defense around you, the right scheme around you, and put you in situations to win more often. So that's the logic there. Also, shouts out to Burgundy Blog, because he also brings up a great point. When replying to Dan Quinn talking about putting the defensive backs in bad situations, Burgundy Blog said, I mean, he won't have to do anything to put those DBs in hard situations. The Dolphins will do that alone. I completely agree. That Dolphins receiver core is ridiculous. So Dan Quinn, you really don't have to even do it on purpose. This receiver core is already arguably one of the best in the NFL, arguably the best in the NFL. So, I mean, they have their work cut out for them already, and then you're going to make it harder than that. But it's amazing, because when we get to the cornerback part of this video, you're going to hear that they responded very well. They had good days, really good days, even including Emmanuel Forbes. We'll get there though. Shouts out to Josh Taylor too, because he brings up a good point as well. He said Washington Commanders head coach Dan Quinn said that they're almost done with the install phase of both offense and defense. And I'm surprised a lot of other people aren't talking about this, because that means that, like, basically playbook wise, they're just about done with giving everybody the entire playbook, making sure they know the ins and outs of the offense, formations, different personnel groupings and things like that, audibles, all of the like technical X's and O's stuff. They're basically done teaching everybody that. You know, they did piece by piece. They like do a part of the offense, part of the defense, make sure everybody's on track. We're good. Everybody understands it. We get it. We can move on to the next part. We're now pretty much at the last part and then finishing up. So basically now from here on out, once we're done installing the offense and defense, everything else is strategically working and towards beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Everything will be building an offense, building a defensive game plan to do whatever we have to do to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from here on out. And I feel like we're further ahead of schedule when it comes to that than I expected. So I'm happy to hear that, man. And then also, shouts out to Serge the Shooter, because he brings up a great point. Dan Quinn is great in the presses, man. He gets to his points and elaborates if needed. And Riverboat Ron was kind of odd in that space. And I agree. He was a little awkward. I don't feel like he was bad, but Dan Quinn just seems more natural. I'm completely with Serge the Shooter there. And then also, before we move on to every position group, just an overarching theme, just to let you know, unlike that Ravens joint practice last year against another playoff contender, the Commanders held their own today against the playoff contenders in the Miami Dolphins, certified playoff contenders. And you could argue that they honestly may have actually won the day based off not only what Commanders fans and reporters are saying and media members, but even from the Dolphins side. You're going to hear some quotes that we're going to get to, especially during the Jayden Daniels part of this, where you're like, wait a minute. They actually went out there and balled out today, man. And I love to hear it. Now moving on to the quarterbacks. And shouts out to Chick Hernandez, because before practice like officially got going, quarterbacks from both teams were apparently playing the bucket game. You know, they stand about like 30 yards away, and then they try to throw it perfectly into like a small bucket. And he said at a certain point, after all of the quarterbacks went, Jayden Daniels was the only quarterback to hit it. Now, I don't know what the exact result was by the end of the competition, but at a certain point, after everybody got a chance to go, Jayden Daniels was the only one to hit the target. Just another way that he stood out, even amongst a lot of other veterans, including Tua Tagovailoa. And then as you can see on the screen right now, Jayden Daniels dancing to a song. Shouts out to Scott Abraham, because he caught Jayden Daniels vibing out to some music again. I believe it was literally the last training camp practice that we had that he was vibing out to Nardo Wick. Now he's doing it to Lil Baby. So shouts out to Scott Abraham for making sure that he catches that, and shouts out to Jayden Daniels for feeling the music that much. Again, Kendall Fuller was in charge of the radio, and I'm guessing Jayden Daniels liked it, man. That's all that matters. And now let's get into what actually happened in team drills, the part that you care the most about, especially when it comes to Jayden Daniels, and where all of this hype is coming from not only the Commander side of things, but the Dolphins side as well. Their media members, their reporters, just absolutely astonished by what Jayden Daniels did today. First of all, David Harrison said at 11:02 a.m., Jayden Daniels completed 5 of his 6 red zone passes in the first team periods against the Dolphins, and 4 of those 5 were for touchdowns. The first one was to Terry McLaurin, who ran a dig to the middle of the end zone, beating cornerback Kendall Fuller in the process. Then Christian, a Dolphins reporter, said Washington Commanders rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels is giving Miami's defense hell in the red zone drills. Daniels has 5 consecutive touchdown passes against the Dolphins defense right now. And then shouts out to Serge the Shooter, because he said this as a quote tweet to that previous tweet from the Dolphins reporter, and I agree wholeheartedly. He says shouts out to the gang for covering the squad, like basically shouts out to John Com and Chick Hernandez, all of these people, Sam Fortier and Ben Stan Diggs, JP Finley, all of those guys. Shouts out to everybody, Mason Kinahan, that's going to these practices and documenting what's going on. But it means so much more, and it sounds so much better when you're hearing it from reporters on the opposite side, because you know it's real. It's not, there's no bias at all involved, and if anything, if there is any bias, they're rooting against Jayden Daniels. So for those guys to admit that Jayden Daniels is hooping and making our defense look crazy right now, then you know it was really happening. You know that it was the truth. Shouts out to another Miami Dolphins reporter named David. He said the Commanders quarterback Jayden Daniels lights up the Dolphins defense in red zone drills. He throws 5 touchdowns, including 2 to Terry McLaurin, beating Kendall Fuller once, and then Kader Kahu, I hope that's how you pronounce his name, he said he beat him later. And then David Harrison came back and said that Jayden Daniels' second interception of the entire training camp, the first and only, well, not the only, the first interception today, and it came on a ball where he threw it to Cole Turner, who lost control of it somehow as he was being hit from behind, and then the ball popped up, and then a Dolphins DB came down with it. He said that he didn't know who the DB was, but apparently it was Marcus May, as reported by other people. And shouts out to my boy RVA Point of Views over there. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. Make sure you follow him on YouTube. Great insight. I believe he was actually there at the practice today in Miami. I mean, boots on the ground again. My boy, if you want any details on what happened today in practice, I'm going to shout him out a lot throughout this video because he provided great insight. That's my boy at RVA Point of Views. RVA POINTOFVIEWS. Make sure you told him I sent you. But he pointed out the fact that the first turnover by both teams today was forced by the Dolphins defense, the one that we just talked about, where Cole Turner, he said that Jayden Daniels hit Cole Turner in the numbers. You're supposed to catch that, but he got hit from behind at the same time. Ball popped up, and that's how Marcus May got the interception. So I want to emphasize the fact that that was not Jayden Daniels' fault. And then towards the end of practice, it was apparently so hot outside that they had to move to the inside facilities and field to finish up the practice. But my question is, and we're about to talk about it, after they moved inside, did they put grease under Terry's cleats or something? Was that the strategy for them to make their DBs look better because they were getting torched earlier? Was that their rebuttal, their revenge, because their counterattack? Because I didn't hear anything about Terry McLaurin slipping at any point during practice or at all outside all day, but as soon as they move inside, he falls immediately, which takes me to Jayden Daniels' second interception of the day. Nick Javala said the first play in 2-minute drills for the Commanders offense, as soon as they went inside, Terry McLaurin falls on a route and Jayden Daniels is picked off by none other than Kendall Fuller, and that literally ended practice. The offense went from outside to inside, one play. Terry McLaurin slips, Jayden Daniels throws an interception because of it, and then that's literally the end of the practice for the offense at the very least. Maybe it was the end of practice just in totality. And shouts out to David Harrison again, because he said Kendall Fuller intercepts Jayden Daniels to finish the practice between the Dolphins and the Commanders. So it was everybody. That was it. They went in for one play, cooked. Terry McLaurin slipped and fell on an out-breaking route, leaving Kendall Fuller the only man there to field the pass, and that was 2 picks from Jayden Daniels today, and that's really really annoying to me, man, that Jayden Daniels had one of his best days of the entire summer against a really good defense, but he had 2 interceptions as blemishes on his record today, and none of them were his fault. None of them. And I really don't like how interceptions really count against quarterbacks statistically anyway, no matter whose fault, especially when it's not the quarterback's fault. But that's the way it's been forever, so they'll never change that. Don't ever expect them to change that. It's annoying, but it is the way that it's supposed to be, really. Because if you really care about somebody like taking outside factors into account, like whether it was the receiver's fault or the tight end's fault or whoever, Pro Football Focus incorporates that in their grades, I believe. So if you want like a more accurate reading and not just necessarily just being a box score watcher, maybe you prefer Pro Football Focus or something like that. But if you're a box score watcher and you just watch the stats basically from training camp practice today as like a simulation for what happens in a game, Jayden Daniels threw 2 interceptions today. But when you dig deeper, you find out that those interceptions were not his fault, but they count against him. If this were a regular season game, those are 2 interceptions placed on Jayden Daniels and not on Cole Turner or Terry McLaurin for slipping. But I do love how Kendall Fuller took bows towards the Commanders sideline after he got the pick. I'm not mad at that at all. I love that trash talk. That's what I'm here for. Do stuff like that and celebrate. Shouts out to Fuller, man. You got lucky. You got lucky. That was not an interception you were supposed to have. But hey, man, talk your stuff anyway, man. I love that type of stuff. I love that environment. I'm here for that. Also, moving on, shouts out to the Miami media. Shouts out to Josh Taylor for this tweet, first of all. Shouts out to the Miami media with the play-by-play coverage and hyping up both teams for good and bad plays. I feel like they did a way better job of staying very neutral and unbiased when it came to their coverage of the joint practice this time. They didn't upload a lot of footage from practice today. We didn't get a lot of clips, which did suck a little bit, but they showed Jayden Daniels a lot of praise, and they did not have to do that. The Jets fans and reporters did not give our team much credit at all, especially compared to what the Dolphins fans and media members did this joint practice today. So you can also say that we did just look way better on top of it, so maybe that's why there is more praise. It's probably a mix of both, like to where we looked better against the Dolphins than the Jets, so maybe we didn't deserve as much praise against the Jets. But at the same time, all of the bad press that Emmanuel Forbes was getting, nobody talks about or shows you any of the footage of him getting an interception in that Jets joint practice or shutting down Garrett Wilson like two or more snaps. I believe it was like multiple snaps. All you see is the snaps of him getting cooked. And I just feel like, shouts out to the Dolphins fans for not doing us that way and praising Jayden Daniels even more than I saw them praise Tua Tagovailoa after practice. Shouts out to Dolphins media member Omar Kelly. He said, "We're tabulating what happened for the day because we can't all watch every part of the field. In red zone work, Miami had 2 touchdowns while Washington had 8. Miami rebounded, but that was like being down 28-0 in the first quarter. Jayden Daniels was cooking them boys." And again, Dolphins media members even admit it. And the Miami media members seem to love even just watching Jayden Daniels do his thing today, and I love that. But even beyond them, you also had Pete Prisco of the national media. He tweeted, "Watching Commanders practice today against Miami, and Jayden Daniels can really throw it. Passes get onto the receiver in a hurry. He is going to be special." This is not a Miami Dolphins media member. This is not a Commanders media member. This is just an innocent bystander on the sideline, just taking it into practice and observing that Jayden Daniels is going absolutely crazy. That's basically all there is to it. I mean, he's getting so much love from the media today. It's music to my ears. And then Kendall Fuller after practice even had some praise for Jayden Daniels. He said, quote, "He looks like a pro the way he carries himself," unquote. And he had other praises as well, but that's just about as high you can get as far as praise goes for a rookie. He looks like he's been doing this for a while. That's big time, especially coming from a cornerback that had to cover and go against him today in person. And shouts out to Scott Abraham, because I completely agree with this. He said Jayden continues to stack days. I'll use the word encouraging for now. Long way to go, but it's hard not to be excited for what's to come. Again, especially since Miami Dolphins media members even love him. Shouts out to @Commanders Realm. He tweeted, "News out of Miami suggests that Washington has no wide receivers, but Jayden Daniels is still lighting the Dolphins D up. I guess that's good. I guess. I mean, you got to see the thing glass half full. Yeah, maybe our receivers aren't living up to what Dan Quinn wanted, but it didn't stop the Commanders for absolutely killing the Miami Dolphins defense today in practice." Again, a Miami Dolphins reporter himself said that by the time the Dolphins had 2 touchdowns in red zone drills, the Commanders offense already had 8. and basically said it was the equivalent of being down 28-0 and then making somewhat of a comeback, but not enough to win the game. So that tells you everything you need to know about what the offense did today. Now moving on to running back, nothing very noteworthy. No matter where I dug up, nobody was really talking about the running backs, but this is a really cool moment between Alabama teammates Daron Payne, Tua Tagovailoa, and I believe Brian Robinson was involved as well. And man, I just can't wait for my Georgia Bulldogs to be doing that same thing for the Commanders. I've been watching other teams' joint practices, and you'll see a bunch of Georgia Bulldogs from 2 different teams take pictures with each other, but the Commanders can't do that because we just for some reason don't bring in Georgia Bulldogs. So I'm sad to see that. I'm hoping that we can reach the same level that the Alabama Crimson Tide have going on. Shouts out to them, man. No hate at all. Big salute, big respect to y'all. But we're on the way. We're going to catch y'all. We're coming. I'm telling you right now, we about to set a draft record in this 2025 NFL draft. Y'all will see. You can go ahead and hold the receipts now. Moving on to the wide receiver position. Again, Miami Dolphins reporters saying Terry McLaurin beat Marcus May for a touchdown on a goal line throw and said this rookie is all caps good. More so complimenting Jayden Daniels, but again, Terry McLaurin not only beat Marcus May at one point, but he also caught a touchdown pass against Kendall Fuller as well. But he also emphasized again, beautiful throw by Jayden Daniels. Every compliment that a Dolphins media reporter had to say about any player about the Commanders, Jayden Daniels was somewhere thrown in there as well in the mix. They just couldn't go without talking about Jayden Daniels no matter what the situation was. And shouts out to Ben Standard because he brings up a good point. Here's another one that interests me, even outside of Olamide, Zacchaeus, and of course Jahan Dotson and De'Ami Brown and all of these other guys competing for the receiver spots that are left. He mentioned that Kazmir Allen, Quinn has cited him a couple of times in camp. He shined a few times. One way to get him the ball more, beyond just in the return game, is working the speed threat out of the backfield. And I completely agree. I think Kazmir Allen has some flashes. He may not make the 53-man roster. I thought he was potentially trending that way just over like a week ago. But even though Jahan Dotson isn't a true wide receiver 2 yet, I would say the back end of this receiver group is pretty competitive. Maybe none of those guys are good enough to be wide receiver 2s, but when we're talking about as far as looking for wide receiver 4, 5, and 6 depth, we have a really strong competition going back there. I know that's not the best thing in the world to hear, but I mean, we're gonna end up cutting some guys that are gonna get picked up by other teams is my point. And then moving on to the tight ends, thanks a lot, Cole Turner. Again, thanks a lot, because you already beat out my boy Armani Rogers, and then now you're doing this, where you're causing Jayden Daniels to end up with an interception that he didn't deserve. Ball was thrown to your numbers. You allowed yourself to get hit and drop the ball, which ended up getting intercepted. But I'm not going to lie. He looked good blocking-wise against the Jets in that preseason game. I was pleasantly surprised. He's definitely improved that aspect of his game big time. He's really been working hard there. You can tell this guy has been working hard. But he better stop making mistakes. I mean, it's even crazier that his one true definitive positive skill going for him is his contested catch ability. And if you're not doing that well, you look pretty crazy out there. Your one thing is contested catches, and then you're out here dropping contested catches that are leading to interceptions. And do not sleep on Kosin Yankov, the undrafted free agent tight end / fullback type of guy. Or you never know. Maybe they only keep 3 tight ends because they love Ertz, Bates, and Sennett enough to where, and they just feel like they need another spot elsewhere on the roster, maybe like offensive line or linebacker with all of the injuries that we have in those position groups. So Cole Turner, I'm not going to lie, it's time to step it up. I like your talent. I love how much he's improved as a blocker. Like a lot. He's improved a lot. Can't lie. But we can't have you dropping passes that lead to interceptions, man. Especially on throws that hit you right in the numbers, man. I'm wishing you the best. I hope you go out there and ball out against the Dolphins in preseason, because you got to do something to make up for a play like that. And then shouts out to Omar Kelly, again, another Dolphins reporter. He mentioned the fact that John Bates came down with a beautiful touchdown pass from Jayden Daniels. This guy was spreading the ball everywhere, man. Absolutely spreading it around. And then he tweeted, "The kid is hot." Again, no matter the compliment about any other player on the Commanders, Jayden Daniels is going to be involved somewhere in there, especially when they're talking about the offense. And again, that's great news. Not only the fact that Jayden Daniels can spread the ball around and ball out no matter who's available, because again, his favorite target out of this entire team, Zach Ertz, was out of practice today. But also the fact that John Bates is here Like, I mean, he literally is here on this roster for his blocking ability. First and foremost, everything else comes after that. But even he's making plays in the passing games, catching touchdowns, which means that he could potentially grow into a true dual threat type of tight end. Not even necessarily because of his skill set, but more so because of scheme and Jayden Daniels' ability to accurately place the ball to everybody. So John Bates will be the type of guy to where it's not like Jeremy Sprinkle, where, yeah, he's known more so for his blocking, but when he's on the field, teams are going to assume that we're just automatically going to run the ball because that's what he's good at. You don't expect him to go out there for a route. Linebackers aren't even going to acknowledge him and respect him. They're not even going to be disciplined. They're just going to let him go and assume we can, when in doubt, force an incompletion or rally to tackle him for very little gain. No, you can't do that with John Bates. They were doing that with Jeremy Sprinkle. You can't do that with John Bates. And then offensive line wise, nothing major. I was digging, and really the only offensive line info that I could dig up was when B. Mitch after practice uploaded a clip of him basically running down what he saw it happen in practice today in that joint practice against the Dolphins, and he basically said that Andrew Wiley and Cornelius Lucas participating at this joint practice helped Jayden be more successful compared to the Jayden that we saw against the Jets in that joint practice. So B. Mitch basically gave those two guys a lot of credit for finally getting back healthy and returning to practice for why Jayden Daniels was able to carve up the Dolphins offense today. So that just lets you know that Jayden Daniels has the talent. He can be a great quarterback, but he needs protection, man. That Jets joint practice showed you everything you needed to know about why Jayden Daniels needs protection. Now moving on to the defensive side of the ball. And the defense had a couple of small scuffles today, man. Nothing big enough to consider a fight, but some small scuffles. And apparently the offense didn't get into any scuffles today. And I love that. That's literally how it's supposed to be. Your offense is supposed to be smooth, on schedule, efficient, and focused on scoring, no extracurricular activities. While your defense is supposed to be hard-hitting and playing with an edge that agitates the opposing offense and gets them basically out of character and out of their groove. And that's basically what happened today. So that was great. I feel like if you had to say who won the joint practice, I would argue that the Commanders won it. But then again, the Dolphins didn't have Jalen Ramsey. They were probably missing other starters that I'm not aware of. But at the same time, we didn't have still our starting left tackle. We've had injuries throughout and everything. We also probably don't have a lot of starters playing too much anyway. Zach Ertz was out, Jayden Daniels' favorite target. So maybe it evens out, maybe it doesn't. But either way, based on what we had to work with on both sides, it seems like the Commanders may have slightly won the day against a playoff contender. That Jets joint practice, I don't know what that was. I think a lot of that had to do with the O-line and how hurt we were. And granted, it may not just be a coincidence, the fact that our offensive line may not be fully healthy yet, but they're healthier than they were against that Jets joint practice. And just overall as a team, we just look way better. But even our DBs looked way better against the Dolphins than they did against the Jets. So that was definitely just an improvement on their own end outside of other factors. But shouts out to Sam Fortier, because he said it's funny watching the two fields. On one, Commanders offense and Dolphins defense are chill, working, doing what they're supposed to do. On the other, the Commanders defense and Dolphins offense trying to beat each other up every chance that they basically get. Now moving on to the defensive line, and they were the source for a lot of these scuffles. Like Mitch Tisler said, that one play, Jonathan Allen just blew up Robert Jones and would have killed Tua. It would have been a sack if like it were a real game scenario, but I'm pretty sure the quarterbacks are not allowed to be hit, so he kind of just had to breeze by him. But in real life, on a real game setting, that would have been a sack. And then after the play, some small scuffle between Daron Payne and Liam Eichenberg broke out. Nothing major, but you know, maybe Liam Eichenberg was tired of getting bullied by Daron Payne, and then he just saw his quarterback would have gotten eviscerated in a real game scenario. It probably frustrated him a little bit. Then Ben Standig said that some extracurriculars after a couple of plays involving the Washington's defense and Miami's offense. So you had the Daron Payne play where he was in the middle of the first one, and then Andre Jones was in the middle of the second one. He said nothing crazy, but just something to note. And then shouts out to the Dolphins reporter, the David one, because he said it's getting chippy between the Dolphins and the Commanders. Washington's Andre Jones seemed to try to headbutt somebody and his helmet came off. Now, I don't know what that is, Andre Jones. I don't know what you got going on. And this is after a dust-up between Liam Eichenberg and Daron Payne. But then, right after all of that, after the two scuffles, here comes safety Tyler Owens with a big hit on tight end Durham Smythe. for a breakup. Basically what happened to Cole Turner earlier, which led to an interception, Tyler Owens basically did that to the Dolphins tight end. And it didn't result in an interception, but basically ball right where it needs to be, and then a safety comes down and makes a big hit or something like that. Shouts out to Tyler Owens for getting revenge for what happened to Cole Turner. I love that. We're definitely going to talk about Tyler Owens when we get to the safety position, because you know he's one of my 3 guys. Sadly, one of my guys has gone to the Eagles, but the other 2 are still here, and they're making plays. We're going to talk about both of them in this video, Jeremy Chinn and Tyler Owens. Also, after practice, Miami Dolphins guard Rob Jones said, quote, "Washington's got a good front," unquote. You could tell they were getting beat up on today, and shouts out to Bleeding Burgundy and Gold, because he said on Twitter, "That boy met that Alabama wall today," unquote. And that's the truth, man. That ain't nothing but the truth. That boy was not ready for what he had to deal with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, a motivated duo of Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne. He wasn't ready for that. Then moving on to the linebackers, shouts out to Ben Standig for pointing this out. He said, "Something I'm watching in practice is which players get extended reps at a different position. Safety," but this is why we're including this in the linebacker part of this video. Safety Dominique Hampton, a rookie, will play in the box at times, but he's also getting a lot of linebacker work now in front of me where he was at practice. That he tweeted this at 10:42 a.m. And then Craig Hoffman replied to that and said that he saw Albert Breer mention in his notes from Ashburn the other day that Hampton is playing a lot of linebacker, presuming he was told that by someone in the building, essentially. So again, Albert Breer, who is not a Commanders reporter, but apparently somebody gave him the info that Dominique Hampton is starting to, I don't know if he's transitioning a linebacker, but I know for a fact it sounds like he's getting a lot of linebacker work and looks. I know he's primarily going to work in the box, but they're emphasizing the difference between playing in the box and playing as a pure linebacker. It seems like they're trying to develop him as a linebacker, at the very least cross-train him as a linebacker if they still feel like he's more so a safety. I don't know yet. Maybe it's because of the injury to Jordan McGee, but I mean, Dominique Hampton is huge. Him and Jeremy Chinn are built like linebackers essentially, so it could work if that's what they really plan on doing. Then cornerback wise, I mean, this is the Mike Sainristil hour. Now, we do have some compliments to throw towards Emmanuel Forbes. We're going to get there towards the end of it, but Mike Sainristil, I mean, this is his moment for the next few minutes, just by himself. Let's just single him out, man. First of all, Commanders defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. said this about cornerback Mike Sainristil before practice even started. He said, well, he has a command of the star position. When it comes to the signal callers, the linebacker, safeties, and the star, you have to be able to communicate at a high level with confidence. And the young man has that. He does not walk around as if he's a rookie. He asks really good questions. I love that trait. He has a good presence about himself, a maturity about himself that's going to give him an opportunity to help us, unquote. This actually came from probably like a few days ago, maybe even more than a week ago, but I just wanted to make sure y'all heard that quote because I didn't mention that in another video. But I just felt like that was a good way to preface what's going down with Mike Sainristil, what happened in practice today. Because first of all, JP Finley said at 10:57 a.m., red zone drills for Miami and rookie Mike Sainristil breaks up a pass to Tyreek Hill. Good pressure up the middle and the ball fluttered. And then, so shouts out to the pressure from the defensive line, but also still great coverage by Mike Sainristil to handle Tyreek Hill like that. That's very notable. We're not just going to brush over that like it didn't happen. And then Mitch Tisler said that Sainristil might already be the best cornerback on this team. As a rookie, hasn't played a single regular season game yet. He plays so smart. Back-to-back plays for him. Dolphins ran a reverse. He stayed home and got a tackle for loss. So that's anticipation, that's discipline, that's IQ, that's awareness, that's instincts, but it's also tenacity to be that small and go make a tackle for loss in the backfield on a run play. And then right after that, back-to-back plays again. Tyreek Hill ran a fake reverse, and Mike Sainristil stayed home and forced Tua to check the ball down away from Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill was his favorite option there. Mike Sainristil did such a great job in coverage, especially instinctually, and reading the offense and reading what route and what was going on in the backfield, staying disciplined and all that type of stuff, to the point that Tua had to look away from Tyreek Hill, his primary option, and go elsewhere. And then, again, just to remind you, Mike Sainristil also had a big pass breakup on Tyreek Hill earlier in the day in the end zone. Lock up, man. Shouts out to Ben Standig. He said Mike Sainristil is standing out early in joint practice because he had a pass breakup in the end zone while covering Tyreek Hill. He stayed home on a reverse the next play. And then he also said the savvy rookie feels like the safest bet among all of the corners in our roster right now, on our roster right now. That's insane. Mason Kinahan said, quote, he's practicing and playing like the best corner on the team, and it's not close right now, unquote. So not only is a lot of different people saying that Mike Sainristil looks like the best corner on the team, Mason Kinahan is even saying that it may not even be close right now. And then Dolphins beat reporter Chris Perkins said that, quote, that was probably the only time that Tyreek Hill was fairly well covered all training camp, unquote. So he's basically saying that Mike Sainristil has done a better job covering Tyreek Hill than anybody else has done the entire summer. Kendall Fuller, Marcus May, any of the Miami Dolphins DBs. I'm assuming that Jalen Ramsey may have been healthy at some point during the offseason. I don't know. Maybe he's missed the entire offseason. But even if you exclude Jalen Ramsey, the fact that our second-round rookie that hasn't played a single regular season game yet has done a better job against one of the best wide receivers in the NFL than anybody has done against them all training camp. Mike Sainristil is the real deal, man. That's why I said in the title and before we even got going into this video that Jayden Daniels and Mike Sainristil both have great chances to win Rookie of the Year for their respective sides of the ball. I mean, and first of all, speaking of Mike Sainristil, can we please get him his own number right now? It's looking more and more like De'Ami Brown will for sure make this final 53-man roster, and De'Ami Brown and Sainristil still share that same jersey number 2, like it's college or something. Can we get him his own jersey number by now? I mean, I feel like he's earned it. I mean, like I've been saying since April, since we first drafted Sainristil late April, take that number 0 away from Marcus Mariota. That number is too cold, and it just would look perfect on Mike Sainristil. There's no reason for Marcus Mariota to be holding up a number that cold, because ideally, he never plays in the game. Also, shouts out to Disco for another question. He said, forget the number, basically. He said, can he play outside? How about that question? I'm questioning, can we get him his own jersey number? Disco's like, well, if he's that great in the slot, is there any way that this guy can even play outside? And man, say, man, how do you feel about our best corner? I'm asking y'all as the viewers, not only being a rookie, but also being a slot corner instead of an outside corner. Is that a huge room for concern? We'll see. But shouts out to RVA Point of Views once again, my dog over there, boots on the ground over there in Miami. He said that Tyreek Hill blew past St. Juice at some point in practice on the first play of 11 on 11s, but Tua overshot him. So that's the only reason that wasn't completed for what would have been a touchdown, I'm assuming, if he didn't overshoot him. So St. Juice, outside of that, I didn't hear anything bad from him, but apparently he had that one bad play. And then Nikki Javala pointed out the fact that 2 minutes for the final period of the Dolphins Commanders practice, Emmanuel Forbes and Jeremy Chins each had pass breakups. And y'all already know, I love to hear positive Jeremy Chin updates. Y'all know me, man. Y'all know my 3 guys were Jeremy Chin, Tyler Owens, and Armani Rogers from the very beginning since months ago. Before we even drafted Tyler Owens, I mocked them to us in at least 2 or 3 mock drafts that I did. And y'all know Jeremy Chin was arguably my favorite free agency signing out of all of the ones that we made, even including Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu. Now, sadly, again, my boy Armani Rogers has gone to the Eagles. But to hear both Jeremy Chin and Tyler Owens making plays today in that joint practice against the Jets, I absolutely love it. And Mason Kinahan brings up a great point, because it seems like Forbes had a good day today, because beyond the mention by Nikki Javala of him having that pass breakup in the final 2 minutes of the final period of practice, we didn't hear about Emmanuel Forbes at all. Nothing about him getting cooked. Nobody uploading clips like the Jets did. Jets beat reporters hyping up their receivers like Tyreek Hill and stuff like that. So Emmanuel Forbes apparently is taking good momentum with him into this preseason game. We'll see what it actually looks like in that preseason game. Now moving on to the safeties, of course, my boy Tyler Owens and Jeremy Chin. You love it, especially Jeremy Chin. We're going to talk about Tyler Owens again, but Jeremy Chin-wise, I love to hear about him making pass breakups, because, again, he's one of my favorite and most intriguing players on the team. Outside of Jayden Daniels, those are my top 3. Well, now, with Armani Rogers gone, I guess my top 3 are Jayden Daniels, Jeremy Chin, and my boy Tyler Owens. But Dan Quinn also said that he's pleased with the safety group in camp in general, and talked about how their level of competition and talent is really good. And I've been screaming this since before training camp even started. Safety is arguably one of the deepest position groups we have on this team. Outside corner, maybe not so much. So that's probably what's holding back our defensive back group overall. But the safety group is deep. You're about to find out. Wow. Shouts out to my boy RBA Point of Views again. Boots on the ground. Make sure you follow him on Twitter and everywhere. He pointed out the fact that the second team safeties at practice were Tyler Owens and Derek Forrest. And then he made sure he specified that Derek Forrest was the free safety, of course, and Tyler Owens was the strong safety. Even though Tyler Owens played a lot of free safety in that Jets preseason game, like single half free safety at times as well, like on a complete island. Like only the rangiest of the rangiest guys do that type of stuff, and they put him in those situations and he actually stepped up big time. But he also pointed out the fact that Owens is running with the second team, had a massive hit on the Dolphins wide receiver to break up the pass like we talked about earlier. Again, it was like right after the scuffles, Dolphins are already heated, and Tyler Owens said, all right, you already mad? Be mad about this too. I love that type of energy, man. I love that. He forced an incompletion on that, just like how they did Cole Turner against us, which caused an interception. Didn't cause the interception when Tyler Owens did it, but still a great play. And then RVA also pointed out the fact that Derek Forrest had a beautiful breakup, stripping the ball out of after allowing a 20-yard catch. So the receiver made the catch, he started running, and then Derek Forrest did a heads-up play to force the fumble. This guy is just a ball magnet. He's just going to force turnovers. He's going to be there to pick them up when somebody else forces them, just like how like some of those interceptions he got was from Benjamin St-Juste tipping the ball up. Derek Forrest is just one of those guys that seems to be a ball magnet. He was out there with the third stringers early on in training camp. Then he got hurt, but apparently he's working his way up. Now he's out there with the second stringers above Percy Butler. I don't know if Percy Butler got hurt or something, or if Derek Forrest and Tyler Owens have surpassed them on the depth chart. But either way, that's great news to hear. Not only is Derek Forrest back healthy, not only is he looking good overall, but he's making plays and standing out against a superior offense in the Dolphins. And then now moving on to special teams, and I hope people always make it this far in the video, because special teams has some big updates. First of all, again, shouts out to my boy RVA Point of Views. As you can see, there's a pattern going here. This guy was giving out a lot of great information today at the joint practice. Make sure you go follow him on Twitter and subscribe to him on YouTube. Tell him I sent you. But he said that Sainristil has looked the most explosive and natural when returning with the new kickoff rules from my observation. And Dan Quinn even said something to this extent, said that Casimir Allen and Mike Sainristil stood out the best when it came to kick returns back when we first put pads on. The very first practice we put on pads, Dan Quinn said himself that Mike Sainristil stood out in kick returns. And then RVA is also agreeing with that a couple of weeks later. So apparently Mike Sainristil is our best returner. Jahan Dotson, I guess, may be a close second, but this shouldn't necessarily come to a surprise to people. Now, granted, we don't necessarily want him doing it because he's so valuable on defense, unlike Jahan Dotson, where right now, hey, man, you might want to go ahead and start doing some returning stuff to add some value because you may need it type of situation. But Mike Sainristil, he's too valuable to play return game. Just let him be your starting slot corner, your Pro Bowl slot corner. Keep it pushing. Find a returner and somebody else. But either way, my point is, remember, this guy just switched the corner 2 years ago. It's hard to believe with how instinctual he is, especially with the plays that we just gave you examples about earlier, where he stayed disciplined with reverses, where most corners, even some veterans, but especially rookies and young guys, would have just failed for the reverse, and then it would have been a big play for the opposing team. Mike Sainristil is already wise beyond his years, and he's only been playing corner, again, I want to emphasize, for 2 years. But my main point is, my original point was the fact that he was a receiver, I believe, the majority of his life. He just switched the corner 2 years ago, so it should be no surprise that he's so great in returns, because this is not just a guy that was a natural corner. He was more so a receiver, switched the corner, and it just seems like he was wasting his time for the previous whole 20 years of his life before he switched the corner. He should have been switched the corner, man. And then shouts out to Seawall Sports, because he said the Commanders kicker situation looks to be vastly improved. And when I saw this tweet, I almost shed a tear. Now, granted, this is only one practice compared to all of the kicks that Riley Patterson was missing in other practices, and you've been seeing him doink even in the preseason game hitting the goalpost, which is just a big, huge red flag for me. I was to the point where I was ready to cut both kickers. They only cut Ramiz Ahmed, and they kept Riley Patterson, but I was like, cut them all. But apparently he balled out today in that joint practice against the Jets with more difficult kicks. He'd been missing 43 yarders, 39 yarders, just missing them, doinking them against the goalposts, or just straight up missing them outright and things like that. But today, shouts out to David Harrison, he said a much better day for kicking for the Commanders' Riley Patterson. Didn't see him miss at all today, and his longest make was from 57 yards. Shouts out to Sam Fortier. He said Riley Patterson just probably had his best period of camp all offseason. He went 3 for 3 from 51, 51, and 57. And a Dolphins fan near me said, quote, "Man, we need that guy," unquote. That is crazy. We have other teams jealous of our kicker? Since when? I would have bet my life savings that nobody would have ever said that in this joint practice. This is amazing that a Dolphins fan, I don't know if Riley Patterson got a hold of some Space Jam halftime water. I don't know what happened, but apparently he's a good kicker now. But I'm very skeptical. Y'all know I'm Mr. Optimistic, but especially for him, with as bad as he's been for weeks straight, one practice isn't going to erase what he's been doing for the past few weeks. So I'm going to need to see that consistently, but this is a great first step. Ball out like that and keep going. Sam 48 brings up a great point. It is a really just a week-to-week league, man. You just never know. He can go from looking like one of the worst kickers in the NFL and then looking like one of the best ones, to the point that an opposing team in their joint practice, their fans are saying, "Dang, we need that kicker." Since when? When has anybody ever said that about Riley Patterson? But either way, moving on, we also have one big review. Y'all know I try to find like people's overall reviews from what happened in practice and things like that. And the only one that did like a full, deep, detailed breakdown of the entire practice, you guessed it, my boy again, RVA point of views. He said overall observations from the practice. Offense looked great. Only concerning thing is Jayden Daniels threw off his back foot a lot. So maybe that's more so like a concern for the offensive line, but hopefully when Brandon Coleman gets back healthy, we'll be good to go. Nothing noticeable from Martavis Bryant, so apparently he didn't stand out. Not a good thing at all, but he'll have the preseason game to show what he could do. He also pointed out the fact that the kicker made all the kicks. Thank goodness. That's big time. Just talked about that. He said the defensive line was dominant, especially Jonathan Allen and Dorrance Armstrong. I love to hear that. Dorrance Armstrong, positive news. Not even just good, not great, but dominant. I've been saying, like, we have great depth for this edge rusher group right now, this defensive end group, a lot of depth. Like guys 1 through 5, solid all across the board, and not every team has that. Some teams have like a really good top 2, and then the other ones are just not good at all, almost unplayable. We have 5 guys that can go out there and play any given snap, and they won't be terrible, but our problem is we don't have any high-end talent, at least so we thought. Dorrance Armstrong, based off of the backup snaps he was getting, if you project them onto a starting level amount of snaps, he is a double-digit sack guy. But I was still worried. Like, I mean, that's just statistically. What if he does get starting level snaps and he's not as hungry, you know, as when he was as being a backup? Or maybe he's more fatigued, so he's not as efficient. So maybe he isn't. You can't just simply double his amount of sacks he's been getting in the season because you're just simply doubling the amount of snaps he's gotten in the season. I don't know. I mean, going into this offseason, I definitely didn't expect us to have a Micah Parsons, a Brian Burns, a Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, any of these elite edge rushers, but it sounded like Dorrance Armstrong may be the closest guy we have to it. Very excited. Again, dominant, not great, dominant. Love to hear that. He also said Mike Sainristil is a player with a bunch of exclamation points. We already know what's going on there. He said Forbes didn't look horrible. Now, that's not a glowing review, but hey, I'll take it. He said no turnovers forced by the defense. Not necessarily great, but it's cool. He said Tyler Owens is a freak. Yes, sir. That's what I love to hear. And he also said Derek Forrest flashed as well. Great breakdown. Shouts out my boy RVA again. Now, before we get up out of here, I have a few random updates before we get up out of here. You may want to stick around because some of this stuff is actually pretty cool. So first of all, JP Finley took a picture of the Miami Dolphins facilities and he tweeted, DMV folks might not want to hear this, but Hard Rock Stadium is a great example of an old crappy stadium torn down to the studs and rebuilt the right way. Could happen in Landover, and that's an interesting point. Maybe they just end up going that route. Who knows? And Ben Standig brings up a great point by replying to that saying, I wondered the feasibility for Commanders Field at the point Snyder couldn't find a jurisdiction partner. Can't see Harris going that route, however, though. So, I mean, that's a good point. Maybe we can do that. I doubt Josh Harris wants to do that, but that is an option, like a super when in doubt break glass in case of emergency type of option. Next up, Andy Reid, the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, said that the plan is to play their starters, including Patrick Mahomes, for the entire first half of Saturday's preseason game against the Detroit Lions, and that is very unusual. Very, very unusual. But Grant Paulson brings up a great point. He said, everyone, why would we play our starters in the practice games? And then he said, the team that always wins and is gunning for a three-peat That's what they're doing. So everybody else is worried about playing their starters too much, whereas the Kansas City Chiefs are out here winning Super Bowl after Super Bowl, and that's what they do. Maybe everybody should follow suit. You just never know. I mean, it's no real right answer. There's no one answer. There's a lot of factors in that. It's not just simply because the Kansas City Chiefs play their starters more in preseason games than any other team in the NFL as to why they're winning Super Bowls, but that may be a piece of the recipe. That may be like a small slice of why they've been so great. Shouts out to Oblon on Twitter, always tweeting a bunch of great Commanders information and things like that. He said Chiefs also grade poorly on the NFLPA survey, so apparently players don't like the conditions, but it doesn't mean everything they do is right, even though they always win. So whatever they got to do, they do it. Even if the players don't necessarily love the team, they're winning, and winning makes up for a lot of stuff. And then also shouts out to our boy Mason Brooks. We just released him a couple of days ago. He was immediately claimed off waivers like I told y'all he would. The Panthers even cut their own guard to sign Mason Brooks. They saw him available and was like, man, somebody on this team got to go. So they cut their own guard to replace him with Mason Brooks. I told y'all that. I'm not sitting here acting like we just released a starter in Mason Brooks, but I told you he would not be a free agent for long. There were teams fighting over him, and we were the ones that won the bidding war last year for him. So this was a guy that a lot of teams were interested in. I'm not surprised he got scooped up that quickly. Also, shouts out to this clip right here provided by the Miami Dolphins of Jayden Daniels and Tua Tagovailoa dapping it up before practice, chopping it up and stuff like that. You love to see it, man. Also, shouts out to Jayden Daniels and Chad Ochocinco linking up at today's practice against the Dolphins in that joint practice. Of course, Chad Johnson, one of the biggest, most famous athletes to ever come out of the Miami area, even though he is from I forgot, Liberty City, I believe he's from. That's a part of Miami and everything like that. And so of course he had to pull up for the joint practice, especially since because he's a big fan of Jayden Daniels, so that only made sense for him to pull up to a Dolphins joint practice with Jayden Daniels there, and it only made even more sense that he would take a picture with Jayden Daniels. Made sure he got that done. Also, speaking of Jayden Daniels, LSU is coming out with a new series called The Money Game, and we're gonna get a lot of access to Jayden Daniels behind the scenes and what it was like for him at LSU and things like that. So make sure as a Commanders fan you check that out, because Jayden Daniels will be featured a lot in that. This is from Prime Video. It's going to be released September 10th, so that will be after we've already played at least a regular season game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So at least that's a nice little treat after that. Also, I know most of y'all probably saw it, but ESPN has fired Robert Griffin III, and Griffin, who was recently, just as of last year, viewed as a rising star at ESPN, and he had 2 remaining years on his deal. So something went wrong. Something was like, we got to get him gone now. That wasn't like a gradual thing. I mean, he was rising up and then suddenly it was just a crash. And of course, a lot of people were saying that it was that crazy croissant picture that with his wife that was the last straw that did it, that made ESPN just be like, I can't do it anymore. But man, he was a good sport about it. I ain't gonna lie. He even posted a clip from Friday of them talking about how you get fired on your day off and things like that. So shouts out to Robert Griffin for, going about it the right way. And I'm pretty sure somebody else is gonna pick him up, I'm assuming, especially for college football broadcasting, because I thought he did a pretty good job with the college football stuff. Whenever he happened to be broadcasting and commentating any of my Georgia games, I was actually pretty chill with it. I mean, he wasn't like one of my favorites, but I thought he did a pretty good job. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. And I really appreciate y'all. Stay tuned for all of the content, man. Make sure y'all support this video. If you really enjoyed it, do not leave this video without leaving a like, and of course, always in the comment sections, let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my points. Let me know any additional points or thoughts that you have from the practice that maybe I missed or anything like that. Let me know everything that you're thinking and feeling about what this video was talking about. The joint practice, maybe a preview of the upcoming preseason game, all that type of stuff. Do you believe that Emmanuel Forbes actually had a pretty good day? Do you think Jayden Daniels and Mike Sainristil are everything that people are hyping them up to be? All of that type of stuff, man. And of course, I really appreciate y'all. Do not leave this video without leaving a like. I will be live streaming that preseason game against the Dolphins, all 4 quarters, breaking down everything. Even when we get to the backups of the backups of the backups, I will still be analyzing and breaking everything out, doing my little play-by-play and color commentary at the same time. You know how I get. So make sure y'all pull up for that, support that as well. Appreciate y'all. I'm out.